Good afternoon, everybody. It's 1 o'clock. It's a Monday afternoon, which can only mean one thing. It is the Business Horizons live session. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are on the globe. I know we have a global audience for these, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Jeremy Ambrose. I am a co-founder and director at Entrepreneurial Spark, and you are listening to the Business Horizons session on behalf of the UK Space Agency, in conjunction with Entrepreneurial Spark and the University of Strathclyde as part of the Space Accelerator Programme. Now, we've got a really fascinating topic for you coming up, all about how to hone those entrepreneurial skills. We want to make sure you are involved and having your say and being able to ask all of those important questions that you have coming up. So there's a few ways you can get involved. Firstly, you should be able to see, or you may be on already, the Slido. The event QR code is just there. If you don't have a QR reader, then please just hit on your mobile phone or on a tablet or desktop. Go to slido.com and put in the event code U422. That'll enable you to interact, ask the questions of the live panel and the entrepreneur that we've got coming up. But it also gives us a steer on the topics of conversation that we need to have as we get through. You're all watching on our website. So there's a couple of things. We link into YouTube, so you can set your HD settings to perfect by hitting the settings cog wheel down at the bottom, somewhere left or right. If you hit that, just make sure they're on maximum so that you can see and hear everybody perfectly. If there's a learn that you take from today, if there's something that really sticks out with you, then do share it on social. We are a very social bunch at the UK Space Agency and Entrepreneurial Spark and the University of Strathclyde. So if there is a learn that you do take from today, please get it onto social and help others to overcome their barriers. Hopefully there's going to be a whole load of questions going through on Slido. We encourage the interaction there. If we're unable to get to your question, then we do answer those questions on the blog, the weekly blog that goes out on our website, which you're currently on. There is a blog stream which you'll be able to see the answers to those questions. So please don't hold it against us if we don't get to your question. We will try and we will endeavor to get through as many as we can. So what I want you to go through very quickly is that topic, honing your entrepreneurial skills. It's a hugely broad topic, but the outcomes that I really want to get out of it today is that you'll be able to understand how others have built their proposition. Discover how to build a great team. Some of you may be thinking, but I can't afford a team right now. It's just me, or there's no way I can get the skills that I need to deliver the business goals. Let's explore that a bit further, and hopefully you'll be able to see how you can build a great team, even with lack of resource, lack of time, and lack of money. Understand the common pitfalls in building a business, and also knowing how to leverage skills to grow your business. Leveraging skills is going to be really important as you go, whether you are starting out, whether you're scaling, wherever you are on your business journey. Leveraging skills is going to be really important to you. A bit later on, we have a few people joining us. Those people are Alire Almon, who's the founder of Deep Space Predictive. Now, she will tell me that I've got that wrong, and please do tell me off when you do come on. We've got Rob. Now, I did ask him how to say his surname, and it is Braum, Rob Braum, director and co-founder of Brady Communications. You'll hear more from his co-founder on the video that we show. And also we've got Mark Carey, who's the Innovation and Sustainable Business Director at Evolution Music. We're going to be picking their brains a little bit later on. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. They're really interesting stories that they have and relevant to this honing your entrepreneurial skills conversation that we're going to be having. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. A reminder, all of these sessions are about taking action. So when you do watch this video, please be writing down those things that you want to do within your business. And also on Slido, get some questions in straight away to our expert panel. So please watch and enjoy.
If there's one thing we've learned from working with over 10,000 entrepreneurs across 4 continents, it's that every founder is unique. They all come from different backgrounds, bring their own challenges, but also their own superpowers, the things that make them really stand out. And the sheer number of business books that are available prove that there's no one way, there's no unique formula to success. Everyone achieves success in their own ways. But it can be hard to feel like you're on this path when you're just starting out a new business, particularly in a highly technical industry like the space sector. Not only do you have to learn the process of running and growing a business and everything that comes with that, but you've also got a high bar in terms of scientific, technical, and engineering knowledge to overcome, just to get started. And it doesn't get any easier as you scale. Different challenges arise, which can lead you to ask the question frequently, am I doing the right thing? Is this really for me? Have I truly got what it takes to get this business to the next level? If so, why does it feel like I'm winging it all the time? Reassuringly, you are not alone. All founders feel like this at some point. And our experience tells us that founders from any background can thrive in a sector if they're willing to work on themselves and make good choices at the right time. So let's hear from some founders who've actually taken that journey, about how they got into the sector and what they've learned along the way.
My background is neither as a business person or as a technical person in the space sector. I have always worked in social sciences and the helping professions. I trained as an anthropologist, a social worker and a psychotherapist, and worked in mental health services for 15 years. However, my specialism over time was in attachment and isolation, and especially using technology to help people in isolated contexts access psychological support. Alongside that, I'd always allowed myself to just read and allow my curiosity to take me wherever it would, and been a long time fan of space exploration. And as the Artemis program began to ramp up, more and more the key documents were available online and easy to find. So I was reading about the plans for NASA and its partners to return to the moon and go on to Mars, and especially some of the problems that they were having when they are planning for like a 2-year, 3-year mission. And one of the key hazards for spaceflight is isolation. So it played straight into my area of expertise psychologically, but applying that in the space sector required a lot of technical expertise that I'd yet to acquire.
My company, Amanos, so we're a space tech startup, and we use satellite imagery to try to solve human problems around the world. And the story behind it relates to my previous job, which was in humanitarian development, and I worked with journalists in kind of different, frequently quite hostile or remote regions around the world, focusing on investigative journalism, looking at things like corruption, abuses of power, environmental harm, things like that. And I kept getting frustrated at how hard and how dangerous and how expensive it was to access the information that we needed to properly evidence the story. And I was, as all good conversations happen, sitting in the pub complaining about it to my friend Steve, who is a space systems engineer, and talking about wanting to be able to identify water pollution in a particular reservoir that was contested in a conflict zone. And he suggested using Earth observation data. And that conversation was really the kind of the genesis of the whole idea.
As a business, when we started out, we were heavily technical. There was kind of 3 technical co-founders and kind of 1 business kind of co-founder within industry knowledge. And that there was never a conscious decision to say, well, this is how many co-founders we need, or this is the type of experience we need. Looking back on that, maybe we would have, like, having been through the journey. But as the business has grown, each person kind of took a role that they needed to take, as well as not just the technical, but also the business side of things. So we've kind of grown into it together as a team.
Once I had the software solution, I began talking to communications experts who were asking me, did I know the names of the satellites around Mars? Did I know the data transfer rates of those satellites? Did I understand the orbital dynamics? And I didn't, and I was really intimidated by that. And I kept going, and I just thought, well, in this day and age, this information is out there, so I can find it. And I spent a long period of time going down a bit of a rabbit hole, trying to teach myself that, until a colleague, actually, we were setting up a mental health service in the Western Isles. We were in Stornoway, and he met me, and I was sitting there with my head in my hands, and I explained I was having orbital dynamics problems. And it turned out he did an astrophysics degree and understood the problem, and was quite clear, saying, you don't need to work any of this out. The people who know the answer are already working for the space agencies. You just need to work out this contribution that you're making and make it as good as possible, and then team up with them at the right point. And that's some of the best advice I'd ever had. He became my co-founder, actually. He helped immensely in providing the foundational maths, but also some of the key messages that I'd been trying to say in the sector. He came along with an astrophysics degree, 20, 30 years in telecoms, and he said it, and people went, oh, right, okay. He just said it in a slightly different way, and had a standing because of that background that helped deliver the message. And that's the way things are, and it's helpful. That's a really helpful thing.
Being a technical person, like software engineering, that kind of thing, it's really easy to get caught up in the solution that you're building, like the technical specifics. And for any business, like sales is the lifeblood of any business. You can have the best technology in the world and it can do amazing things, but if you can't get it in front of customers, or you don't know how to market it or sell it or even price it, then you kind of in this position where it's a non-starter. So having like quite a lot of technical experience was great, because we were able to build a product very quickly. But where we saw our challenges was actually in making sure that by the time we had built the product, we had a pipeline of customers, and what does that look like, and how do you support it? And those are the challenges that we've really kind of, as a business over the last few years, really had to kind of face into and figure out how we solve.
I think in terms of the business, I think the value that sort of different background brings is, there are a few different aspects. I think one, a fresh perspective is incredibly useful, because you can look at a piece of technology and you can understand, okay, I see, the shape of this, I see the problem that it's trying to solve. I see broadly the sort of, say the types of data it can deliver. Have you thought about, these other applications for that technology? That's, I think, a fresh pair of eyes can really see new use cases in a way that it's really hard to if you're absolutely in the weeds of something. You've been developing it for years and you're very sort of process and product oriented. You almost don't have the space to look a bit further and to look at the sort of, and then what?
So the overriding theme from all of our founders is that they didn't do it alone. They built teams of people around them who could complement their own skills. But that can be easier said than done. So now let's explore some of the challenges of building a team in the space sector and some of the lessons our founders learned that you can put into practice.
We built the team based on the skills that we needed. So for us, that's data analysis and software engineering. So we spent a lot of time thinking about the technical abilities and the experience that we needed to bring in. And we also really focused on finding people who shared our vision and ambition for the company. So kind of to use satellite data analysis for social and environmental benefit, and to bring those benefits to a wider audience. I mean, I suppose I'm lucky in that my co-founder does have a technical background. So what we did is, we kind of went through the job specification together. We thought about all of those skills, and he was able to bring his expertise to bear and sort of thinking about like, right, well, this is the skill that we need. What's the sort of experience and sort of qualification evidence that we would need to back that up? We also have had those sort of job specs peer reviewed by sort of other, sort of other people in the sector. I think that can be really, really useful if you have a broad idea of a person you want. I think what's also worth remembering is like sometimes that person might not exist. Like the sorts of skills that you're looking for within one person, like that might actually be sort of unrealistic. But it might be that other skills are more likely to fit within a single educational pathway, or sort of, and you just might not know.
So the major skills challenges within the space sector at the moment are really that it's a highly competitive marketplace. So there are a lot of space companies starting up and growing at the moment. Space is becoming is a very exciting new growth area. And so there's a lot of demand for people with the kind of skills that the sector needs. And those skills are very often also skills that are valued in other high-tech sectors. So in particular, we see things like programming is very much in demand across all parts of the space sector. And that's also something that's in demand from tech and from finance and from lots of others as well. It's also worth bearing in mind when you are recruiting that it's not a good idea to wait around for ages for the perfect candidate, because in a lot of space situations, because the skills are quite niche and the number of people who have those very particular skills is quite small, you need to be taking on candidates who maybe aren't 100% perfect and then investing in training to bring them up to the level that you need and to make sure that your gaps are being filled.
I think the advice I'd give to anybody who's coming into the space sector from the outside is not to be inhibited about your vision of what you would like to do. My son had me in his primary school recently, and he just tells people, Daddy invented a space phone for NASA. And my wife laughs and said, he's a social worker from Glasgow. That's what and I have to pinch myself that there is a trajectory from one to the other, but that's largely because I didn't smash my own dreams apart with concern and insecurity that I don't belong in that sector.
I would certainly advise my past self to be realistic about what you can learn, the sort of depth of knowledge, depth and breadth of knowledge that you can accumulate in an entirely new sector. And then the kind of corollary of that is really recognizing the unique experience and expertise that you have that differentiates you from others in the sector, and the value of that fresh perspective. And yeah, as ever, I think it's a mix of really backing yourself and being realistic about what you can achieve.
I think now having run the business for a few years, and we now have a much bigger team, so we're no longer 4 people in a room, we're kind of 20, 30 people. The challenges are a bit different, and where the evolution for the co-founders, because being a co-founder doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best kind of business leader. That's like something that you find out over time. But where we've kind of evolved, especially over the last 6 months, is bringing other people in who have more experience in, say, project management, more experience in customer management, and letting the co-founders essentially hand over some of that stuff that, yeah, they're good at, but they're actually better people to do it now. We have the ability to do that. And I think it's really important that being a leader of a business isn't necessarily just about being the person who's the expert. It's about bringing other leaders into the business, people who can lead other teams, people who can bring the business to the next level. And that's the evolution that we're going through at Hark at the moment.
So to sum up what we've heard there from our founders and industry experts, there are 3 key things for you to reflect on and take action. The first is to find your best role. Instead of trying to learn everything or be all things to all people, find the things that you are uniquely good at and really make the most of those skills. The second thing, in order to balance that out, is to collaborate at the right time. Learn to lead, find the people with the skills to complement yours who can get you to where you need to go, and bring them on board. And the third thing is that practically any problem can be solved by a diverse team. So when you're looking for people to work with, find people that think differently to you, who bring a different background and a fresh perspective. You'll be amazed by what you can achieve. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration into how to thrive as an entrepreneur in the space sector. Now it's time for action.
Wow, I'm still writing notes. If, as I've said before, make sure that you are getting those questions in on Slido as we bring in the expert panel. But I mean, some really core topics for business coming out of there. Making sure you're having the conversations, more conversations than you think you should have more. Getting a fresh pair of eyes on it as well. Somebody who's going to be thinking differently to you. Interestingly, people were talking about getting a critical friend, somebody who can actually tell you the truth. And we heard that on a previous session, not asking your friends and family for advice or feedback, but actually getting a critical friend, somebody who can tell you how it is, who can help you move forward. Complementary skills, leveraging other sectors, peer review of skills, there's so much. But the call to action at the end there was, and there was a few questions from Mike at the end, thinking about, well, what is your best role within the organization? What's your best role to make this business go further? Making sure that you're collaborating at the right time. And also, I love this, any problem can be solved by a cognitively diverse team. Yes. Okay, so get your questions in on the slide. I'll be looking over on my screen to see those coming in. But I want to bring in our expert panel. And we're going to be first bringing in Rob, who's a director and co-founder of Braided Communications. Rob, if you wouldn't mind just coming in and telling us what you do and your part in Braided Communications. Hi.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy, and good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Rob Braum, and Jeremy, congratulations. You're one of the first people who's pronounced my name properly after only being told it once. So it's a pretty unusual name, so I get used to anything. So I'm co-founder of Braided Communications with Drew, who you all saw in the video there. And I've got a background, as Drew said, in astrophysics, but also 25 plus years in various different commercial type roles. And I'd also previously worked in other small companies, including setting up another company in the past. In Braided at the moment, we don't have any specific roles. Drew and I just work together on stuff. But we do very different things in very different ways. To your point of being cognitively diverse, we worked in the same company where Drew was a therapist. I was one of the business people there, so very different background, and we think in very different ways about things. That's always been very positive.
Yeah, really interesting. Well, thank you for being on. I'm going to bring in our second expert, and that is, and I'm going to get her name right. Here we go. Two for two. Aliyah Almon. Please tell me I've got that right, Aliyah.
You're so close. Oh. So close. But I appreciate the effort. I really do appreciate the effort. My name is Aliyah Almon, and I am the founder of Deep Space Predictive Research Team. And I'm also, and the Deep Space Predictive is about creating a psychological alarm system for long-term space travel. And interestingly enough, I met Drew out in the wild in a conversation. So I know about that cognitively diverse kind of team, even though we have very similar backgrounds. But, and another part of what I do is I am the chair of the board for the Colorado Space Business Roundtable. And in Colorado, we are #1 in private space employment per capita in the United States. So a lot of people don't think about space when they think about Colorado when they think about space. But a lot of space stuff is happening in Colorado, and we have the whole supply chain. Lockheed Martin is building the Orion capsule in about 30 miles from where I am right now. You have Ball Aerospace, you have Sierra Nevada, and they're all looking for different solutions for different parts of their businesses. So we have people all across the state of Colorado contributing to the space industry there. And my entree into space, other than being like many very interested space nerd for the most part, I was part of the 100-year Starship project, which is doing a 100-year feasibility study for interstellar human spaceflight. And I was brought in as one of the co-authors of the grant from the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, looking at the social sciences part. So space is a whole bunch of different aspects of it.
And it's amazing to have you on. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us at such an early time over in Colorado. So thank you. I just want to come to reflections on the video that you've just watched. Do you recognize, and I'll come to you first, Aliris, is there a part of the journey, your journey, that you recognize within that video, people talking about it?
Oh, all parts of it. You know, one of the things is when you have a different perspective going into space, you have, oh, well, did they think about X? And my thing is all, you know, the psychological part going into an industry that's very technical. So going to the social sciences, the soft sciences, there's a little bit of resistance, but you still want to bring your expertise. And if you bring that expertise to the table, people will listen because you're not trying to turn a psychologist into an engineer. That's not the right goal. You bring your psychology and match up with the other people to help you get to your goal.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because actually we heard from somebody who was in social work. We heard somebody with a humanitarian background, and actually Jordan at Hark, he was into sensors in the pharmaceutical world. So they were able to bring their expertise and their thoughts and feelings to the space sector. Now, Rob, you were on the other end of that conversation that Drew said. He talked about when he was having orbital dynamic problems. Now, that means nothing to me, but how were you able to communicate that differently to Drew, as he said on the video?
So I think there's a couple of points there. So partly around communicating it differently, partly about understanding it differently. As Drew said, he was focused on that challenge. When he told me about this, the product that we have at Braided, the problem we solve, which is helping people to communicate more efficiently when the ship is so far from Earth that the communication just takes so long, you can't have a normal conversation. I think because I've got an astrophysics background, and even though I'd spent 20 odd years in industry, I am at heart a full-on science geek. So I still kept an interest in it. I've always been fascinated by it. As soon as he started to tell me the problem he was solving and the sort of germ of his solution, my brain just started to go, oh my goodness, that's a stroke of absolute genius. And then when he started talking about the problem he's trying to solve, I was like, it kind of doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And I think the phrase I used was something like, if/when they do finally get people to Mars, somebody somewhere is going to work out how to get color TV pictures back from the surface. They're going to have to. So therefore, don't worry about a tiny data rate you might need for your idea. Instead of that, go think about how your idea can be developed. And more importantly, at that point, I think the first thing I said to him was, don't tell anybody else about your idea until you've protected it in some way, because as soon as you start talking about it, it's out there. And so that's where he started on the journey to begin the intellectual property protection part, which was, to me, I just said, I don't want to hear about this ever again until you protected it. I'm going to forget you told me, kind of thing, as a friend. Shortly after that, he phoned me up and asked me to join him as a co-founder. So things got very different after that. But yeah, that was just having a different perspective. And actually, I think it was a perspective that didn't actually come from the fact that I had an astrophysics background. It came more from the fact that I had a business background. I could see the value of what he'd created and the need for him to protect that before talking about it.
Interesting, because there's a massive, so you've got to go out there and have these conversations. You know, if Drew hadn't had that conversation with you, then you wouldn't have got going. And there's a massive gap between that and holding on to something and protecting it and making sure that you don't have conversations. How did you balance the two as a business? Yeah, well, initially that was initially it was Drew's challenge to kind of balance the two, because I basically told him, you have a fantastic idea there. You're about to give it away if you're not careful. And that was, I genuinely, as a friend of his, all I wanted to do was help him. It was only later that I came to be part of working out how to do that. And he'd obviously asked me because he did trust me. So in the early days, he'd also talked to a few other people, a small number of people, about his idea, and got some very good advice, some very well-intentioned advice, and some advice that probably long-term wasn't quite so helpful, but was certainly well-intentioned. So I think there's a lesson there around, he knew which things he knew and which areas he didn't have the expertise in. Actually exploring carefully with people you trust
in the early days is very important, I think.
That's really interesting, because I guess what he was able to do is go and find out enough insight to make the right choice in moving forward. Aliris, I mean, it's an absolute minefield of making right choices at the right time. How did you do it? How would you advise other people to make the right choice at the right time?
You know, it's interesting that you use the word choice. It all depends on the moment and how you take that choice and the result of that choice. My whole goal is, I wholeheartedly believe in cognitive diversity.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my team is, I have one person from France who was a systems engineer, but a certified doctor of Tibetan medicine, right? And then I have another person who's a science fiction writer. I have someone in the gaming industry. I have data scientists from the School of Theology, you know, and they're the ones creating this, you know, inputting into this idea. So really it's, you know, are you making the right choices at that time? Because you know, hindsight is always 20/20. But really some of this is, you have to take that risk and take that chance that is the right choice in the moment. Because you can never get it perfect, because you don't know what the results are going to be. And making choice A instead of B is going to take you down that path. Doesn't mean it's a bad path, but it's just different. So I think getting your mindset that there is no right choice. It's the best choice at the moment, given what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to completely, you know, that's going to evolve over time. And if there was a straight line from here to here on an entrepreneurial journey, then we'd all go down it, but there isn't. So yeah, absolutely. What's the biggest challenge that you faced so far in getting your business going?
I think it's creating what the product is going to be. And trying, you know, our choice of creating the product is to do research and have, you know, grants. It's to do grant funding to build the product before we take that product to market. And actually we worked with Drew in kind of bringing into fruition some of the ideas, his expertise in isolation, my expertise in choice, another person's expertise in looking at choosing the right person for the right thing, and how teams interact is just understanding how your idea fits together and what that actual product is going to be. Because what you think you started with and what you're going to end up with as the product that's going to be sold is going to be very different. And you have to trust the journey, that evolution is going to happen back to the right choices here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last week we talked about product market fit, and Rob, you just talked about, you know, the problem. Let's focus in on the problem that we're solving, because when we really focus in on the problem, that's when we can figure out, well, what's the next step? What's the right choice? And understanding that will help you move forward. How you know, you got quite animated there, Rob, when you talked about it was a problem worth solving. You know, how did you find out if it's a problem worth solving?
So that's a great question, actually, and there's probably there's a twofold answer to it. So in terms of the core reason that we started the business, what we are trying to do, it's a known problem worth solving. I think Drew mentioned in one of the videos that there's a lot of public information out there that NASA publicizes. If you go digging hard enough, it's pretty clear what the challenges are for future space flight. It's around things like what's the impact of weightlessness on the body, what's the impact of radiation on the body, and also one of them is what's the impact of isolation, which happened to be Drew's area of expertise. A simple fact of physics, everyone knows that you can't travel faster than the speed of light. Mars, for example, is so far away you can't get a communication to Mars any quicker than the speed of light. So therefore, there was an immediate assumption that, of course, when someone in future is on Mars, you can't talk to them because you've got this significant delay, which will be anywhere between 4 minutes and 22 minutes, depending on where the planets are. So how do you have a conversation? And the assumption was you can't, therefore you have to find astronauts who are less susceptible to emotional isolation, which is hard. What Drew came up with, thinking about that differently, not changing the laws of physics, but changing the thinking about the way human beings communicate was kind of essentially saying there's a problem here that's such a big problem it's flagged as impossible to fix, but there might be a way of fixing it. So that's where the genesis of the company came from. What potentially is more interesting though is what we realized, and this comes all the way back to that cognitive diversity, is actually, yes, we're doing that, we're already doing that, we've built it, we're having conversations with NASA, it's super exciting, and it's the bit that gets Drew and I highly motivated. But actually, we also have identified that what we built is potentially opening a door to a new way of allowing people to hold virtual team meetings, specifically around the differences between people at, say, different ends of the extrovert-introvert spectrum. Many cases, there's conversations where people who are introverts don't say anything, aren't bringing forward their ideas because they like to think and reflect and take the time, and other people move on and the conversation's gone and their contribution's been lost. And we're now exploring how the idea that we built for space can now be also deployed in potentially a new way to help people communicate on Earth. So we've kind of got two sides of it. We've got we went out to solve a problem and we think we have, and then fortuitously, we think we've opened up a whole new opportunity as well.
Yeah. And there's probably a lot of people watching this who are probably on the other side of that. They may have built or really focused in on a problem that the rest of the world has. And then they're now looking at applying that to space, which is, yeah. And you talk about the kind of the yin to the yang, and you and Drew, and have cognitive diversity. And Aliris, you've built a cognitively diverse team. Any tips and tricks for those out there to build that team around you to get where you want to get to?
You know, part of it is understanding the different parts of the problem and you yourself being open to different people having the solution. When I think about, you know, the data science part of our work, and the fact that a school of theology has an AI institute, it's like, what's interesting about that? And they invited me to come in to speak about space. So they're already open-minded, but the fact that they are putting a lot of work and effort into developing this relationship between humans and machines is like, well, what can I learn from them? And it turns out through conversation, they are bringing in a level of expertise. When we applied for our grant to NASA, the one piece of expertise I relied on was their statistical background. And, you know, that's where it came from. I wouldn't have thought. I was going there for artificial intelligence and data science, and the statistics is what was most important and what NASA picked up on. And you just never know where people's passions are. So going out and networking and having conversations in general is so important, because you never know. I mean, Drew and I met at a conference at NASA over dinner, just talking random stuff. Obviously it's space, but to know that we were both in the, you know, social sciences amongst all these engineers, we just connected and have this conversation. And that's where we started this partnership, and, you know, things like that. So you just never know. So having those conversations, networking in different places, and just being curious is really important, and trusting that that difference is going to be valuable.
Yeah. I mean, you know, for us extroverts, we're not shy of the word networking. But there's probably a lot of introverts on this call go, networking is not for me. What would you say to that? Because you know, you're right. You've got to have these conversations. Where can you have the conversations? Well,
here's the thing: networking doesn't have to be big. That's the person. It's a one-on-one conversation that you just happen to be. You know, you go to a big networking event back in the before times where we can actually talk to someone, and you just might be sitting there next to someone and you strike up a conversation. I was at a big event and I was on a bench having lunch, and some woman joined me and we had a conversation about, you know, space, and she was a medical doctor and talked about her expertise. It's like, oh, wow, that would be great. But you just never know. It could be that one-on-one conversation in a different space. It doesn't have to go, oh my gosh, I have to go to this huge conference. There's all these people. It's like, no, sit down, just say hello to one person And that's how Drew and I met. That's how I met a lot of the people that I work with, is one-on-one, just conversations, sitting down. It doesn't have to be big.
I love that. Just reframing it. It's not networking. I'm just sitting down and having a conversation. And the more times you put yourself in the situation to have those conversations, those water cooler moments, those whatever they are, then
Exactly.
Brilliant. I love that. And that's probably a great time to give a shameless plug for the networking or the peer-to-peer session that we have on Thursdays, which just go along and just have a sandwich, sat next to somebody in a Zoom room, and just be a fly on the wall and ask some questions. So listen, guys, thank you so much for that.
Can I just come in with one comment on that, Jeremy, actually? So I 100% agree with what Alira said about the networking. One thing that someone told me years ago, I've always taken it to heart, and it's always helped it. When you're out networking, the thing you need to be doing is thinking, how can I help this person? If you go out and you're thinking, how can I get help for me? You come across as needy, but if you're genuinely trying to help, then it's amazing how much that will turn around and help you.
Yeah. That's some great advice. Thank you, Rob. Really appreciate that. I'm now going to bring in Mark. Mark's our entrepreneur. We're going to put the spotlight on him, get his thoughts and reflections on the video that we've just watched, and explore what he has going on. Mark, hi.
Hi, Jeremy. Good afternoon, everyone.
What do you do? Who are you?
Serial entrepreneur, a portfolio of businesses. It's probably easier to explain. There's a key theme that runs through all my businesses. They're either looking at the ways to improve the way we treat the planet, or to create equitable models. So as we've seen in the music industry, where I'm currently placed as well, not particularly equitable for artists, for example. There's an opportunity. And then also sort of putting people before profits as well. So there's a theme that runs through the portfolio. That's but serial entrepreneur. So any of those founders or fellow entrepreneurs or business owners out there, I've probably been through some of those problems myself. So
yeah.
I'm here to.
And I was unfortunate to have already had a conversation with you because you are part of the LEO program that the UK Space Agency are running. And I'm interested to get your thoughts on the video you just watched first. So let's do that. And then I just want to ask you a question.
Yeah, sure. I must say, I was just going to say, Jeremy, that I almost forgot I was waiting to come on, to be honest. I was so intrigued, Alira's and Rob and the fellow founders. The video was fantastic. Lots of points. I've scribbled loads of notes down here. I'm not sure they're going to be cohesive when you ask me the questions, but a lot of them mirrored some of the things I was going to say today that I'd already written down in a slightly different language. But from the video, I mean, inspiring to see that people are looking at business in a more holistic approach now, in a more collaborative approach. I used to get quite, I'm going to say, frustrated by the normal business etiquette, the normal business modeling, people using the same phrases. It's one of the reasons I moved out of the corporate sector about 6 years ago and just focused on what I'm passionate about, which I can talk about today. So it's refreshing to see that now coming through, that people are designing the businesses according to their needs and their passions, and learning to collaborate outside of the traditional model. That's what I'm picking up from a lot of the founders.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got, as you said, you've got a varied background, and currently trying to cross the divide from your current industry into the space sector.
Mm-hmm.
What are the challenges that you're facing right now, getting into the space sector?
I think it was. I think it comes back to that point of research. I don't know what I don't know right now, and so although we know we believe that we have a solution that's fit for this particular market, and we believe it's fit for the market because actually it's transferable into most markets nowadays because it deals with environmental impact. So I believe that we have excuse the pun, a space to fit into there, but we've got a lot of research to do. So, the 10-week program that we're doing with LEO right now, it's all about communicating, collaborating, networking, researching the business model, the understanding of the solutions, the infrastructure around that exists. We've just got to find how that fits into this new market. So the challenge is, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, I think you've hit on something that's very common throughout the video. What the experts were talking about as well, and that is how do you retrofit something into the space industry that you know is proven and you know it works and people want it, but there's a different customer segment that you need to fulfill, and that's within the space sector. That's so difficult. I love your approach. You know, the reason you're on this program is to go and leverage the conversations, the social, just put yourself into more and more situations where you can have those insightful conversations. What other challenges are you facing, Mark, or what are you finding that's actually really good about the space industry?
I'll be honest, we haven't been in that market or that sector for long enough to understand. But I'm hearing, from O'Leary's and from Rob as well, and some of the founders there. I quite like. Sorry, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he made this mention of. I think it was Drew made mention of the fact that there was all these technical scientific bods, and they were talking a different language, and that was. Am I talking their language? What is it that what they're going to think of me? I don't fit in here, do I? I'm from a social sciences background, and I think that's often one of the fears we have as entrepreneurs or as founders or as business people in their own rights, is to go into a marketplace and forget what we bring to the table. And so, some of the points I wrote down that I was going to raise, and some of these have all been touched on, but for me, it's about the passion. What makes you come alive? So it's not just about having the innate skills. It's about having the passion, the vision, the ambition. And that's what you bring to the table, because ideally, what you're looking to do is, where do you bring the greatest value? And I think it was Rob that mentioned there about the idea that if you go out looking for something for yourself rather than helping somebody. So what's the greatest value that you bring? Because that's what you're going in there and that's what you're bringing. And you know what? They didn't know they needed that until you turned up. So just be, powerful enough to stand there and say, I know you're scientific. I know you talk a different language to me, but it's like if we were going to sell to the Germans, and maybe we had to speak German, we might get away with some pidgin German, or maybe they just speak English. We just didn't know it. So I'm just using that as an analogy,
Yeah, no, absolutely, and the space sector is growing hugely year on year, and to reach the target of 2030, then we're gonna have to leverage all kinds of skills, all kinds of knowledge, all kinds of ideas and passions from a lot of different industries into the space sector. So I not being scared of bringing what you bring best over to the space sector is a great piece of advice. And also going in with open ears and open mindset, and I guess looking out for those cues of where you're not so good, where you're not so passionate, being able to find the people to put around you to get the information that you need to move forward in the space sector. It really, and again, I'm kind of applauding the way you're going about it, Mark, because you're putting yourself in those situations. I guess there's advice in there for other people trying to make that crossover to go and put themselves in those situations. Really interesting. How are you going to make sure that you're able to communicate properly in the space sector? Because I didn't know what orbital dynamic problems were and all of the technical stuff, but how are you going to make sure that you cross that divide?
I think again, we've already heard it from the founders and the fellow entrepreneurs today, the other speakers on here. It's literally about collaboration, and my biggest learning over the years is about again just sticking to what you're really good at, knowing what strength you bring to the table, and then surround yourself with the people that can do those other bits for you. So I'll always have a core team of passionate directors or founders in the business, and then everybody else is either a subject matter expert or on the advisory board. And that's if you've got a big idea. And can I just say one thing? I know we've probably got to jump around a bit. I've got so many things to point to, but Rob mentioned IP. IP, make sure you get your confidentiality and IP from day one. Get that sorted and find a way. There's a whole other conversation, I know, but I just want to shout that out to all the people listening in today. It's important. So when you start collaborating, have some generic phrases that you can put in. So I'll use like ecologically sustainable solutions. Well, what's that all about? Well, I can tell you a bit more about it in these areas specifically. I'd like to know more. Well, let's talk about an NDA so we can talk confidentially about that. But absolutely, subject matter experts and advisory boards. Often there's lots of people that maybe are semi-retired, or they're in an academic position, or they just like being non-exec directors, or they're in the sector and they want to see an evolution of the sector or the market, and they're happy to be on an advisory board.
Yeah.
Leveraging
those. It's leveraging those assets that you have around you, differing skill sets, different mindsets, different, cognitive diversity put around you, and you'll be able to cross that divide. Yeah. No, totally. Thank you, Mark. I just want to bring in Aliris and Rob again, just to get their kind of final thoughts on it. And anything that you would want to say to Mark, or Mark, anything that you'd want to say to the expert panel. Who wants to go first? There's got to be some.
I was going to say, yeah.
So,
well done. I was intrigued listening, so thank you.
Rob, go on.
Yeah, I'll come with a comment, which is it's sort of in reply to some of the things Mark said, but also as a sort of general theory. One of the things that I was picking up from some of the comments in the original video was almost people thinking of starting to imply that there's something magical or special about the space sector. And actually, there isn't, right? It's just another sector. And one of the people in the video talked about sales. When it comes out, there are some special things that you have to have conversation about. Orbital dynamics and orbital mechanics isn't something you encounter in many other places. But equally, if you're in the car industry, there's a whole bunch of particular things. In the music industry, there's always those technical things, but still underneath it all, there's finance, there's operations, there's sales, there's intellectual property. So I don't think anyone who is either newly in the space sector or an entrepreneur starting there should be thinking, oh, this space sector is so special that I need to do something different. Now, any advice that anyone would give you for a general sector will almost certainly apply in space sector. At the end of the day, cash is king. If you haven't got cash flow or funding, you're out of business.
Absolutely. And working with Mark, as I am currently, we boiled it down to a real interesting point, and it's now Project Space Bins. That's right, isn't it, Mark?
That's it. Jeremy, you've just given that to the public. Come on.
I have. IP, you protected that name, haven't you, Mark? Yeah. Aliris, any thoughts and feelings?
Listening to all of this, and I'm glad Rob and Mark brought up the business side of it. I mean, the other half of it is, how do you communicate what you're trying to do in the space, like any business? What is your story? You have your passion, you have the problem you're trying to solve, but then you also have to sell. One of the big thing is, having a board of directors, which are your mentors, is to use them wisely, because they have the time. They may not ask for any money at first, but they're willing to listen and give you guidance because they want to see you succeed, and trust in, the learnings of your elders. You don't have to go through this alone, and finding those mentors is really important and will definitely move you forward and helping you make better choices, not the right ones, but better choices as you go forward.
Yeah, and I can't thank you enough for actually raising that point, because that's something that we're not great at, and that is, as entrepreneurs, we don't have cash, we don't have resource, and we don't have time. But actually, I would probably reflect on that and say, take the time to go and put the right mentors around you. Not mentors don't cost you a penny. Some might, but go for the ones that don't. But put the right skill sets around you to challenge you cognitively. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, guys, thank you so much. I could carry on this conversation for all day, but thank you so much for being part of today and lending in those nuggets of information. And Mark, keep pushing, and I look forward to seeing how far you go. Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
So, it probably segues nicely into we've got a couple of points that have come through. Firstly, some organizations don't do NDAs, government agencies mainly. Don't let it drive you away. Yeah, have the tenacity, go and have those conversations. And yeah, really interesting. But yeah, listen, as I said, I could go on forever about this, and that's where the conversation doesn't stop, because we continue on Thursday to our peer-to-peer session where we are talking about that, where we're talking about the how to hone your entrepreneurial skills. It does say product market fit up there. It's all about honing your entrepreneurial skills, leveraging team, leveraging the assets that you have around you, but also it gives you the opportunity to go and have a sandwich with somebody on a park bench in that Zoom room and just be a fly on the wall and listen in, but also ask a key question that you have. That's on Thursday, the 1st of April, and that's till 12 to 1:30 p.m. That is the QR code there. Please do scan that. There should be a link down at the bottom of your webpage as well. If you just scroll down slightly, sign up for that, and I would love to see you there. I hope we've hit these key outcomes. I really do. I hope you can now understand how other people have built their proposition, discovered what your next step is to building a great team, and not necessarily that the paid team, just those support angles or those people that you need to put around you to ask you the right questions at the right time, and how to leverage those skills to grow your business, but also understanding those common pitfalls in building a business that maybe you need to look out for as you go through this. As always, please give us some feedback on these sessions. We want to make them better. We want to improve. It's an iterative process, as with any entrepreneurial journey. So please do scan that QR code there. Give us some feedback. It's a very short survey on SurveyMonkey. And also, if you, again, want to continue the conversation online, we have a fantastic portal called Discord, which is helping bring those conversations together, like-minded people trying to grow their businesses, and just ask a question somewhere in there. There's mentors on there. There's space industry experts. There's entrepreneurs. So join the Discord channel and continue the conversation. So that's it from me. I do want to make sure that you have the link for next week. It is not on a Monday. It is not on Monday. It is on the Tuesday because of Easter. So Tuesday the 6th at 1 p.m., Tuesday the 6th of April at 1 p.m., all about the funding landscape. Now, I know that's going to be crucial to a lot of the businesses that are heading their way through growth right now. So the funding landscape, next Tuesday, the 6th of April, and you should have a link at the bottom of your page to go and sign up for that. It's a button. Go and sign up for that now, and we shall see you on the 6th. Thank you so much.